Well, hello everybody. You ready to study?
Yes.
You're not going to go to sleep on me? It's right after lunch, you know. All right, we're going to continue where we left off last time. We were studying about the mystery of God, right? And I believe that we read Revelation 10, verse 7, where it says, "But in the days of the sounding of the seventh angel, when he is about to sound, the mystery of God will be finished, as he declared to his servants the prophets." So what this is saying is that right before the seventh angel of the seventh trumpet blows his trumpet, the mystery of God will finish. The mystery of God does not finish when the seventh trumpet sounds. It closes just before the seventh trumpet sounds. Of course, the question is, what is the mystery of God? The mystery of God that will be finished, and it was said to the servants, the prophets. Well, let's go to Romans 16, which we read when we were ending this morning. Romans chapter 16, 25 to 27. The word mystery is used here in connection with the gospel, the preaching of the gospel. It says there, "Now to him who is able to establish you according to my gospel and the preaching of Jesus Christ, according to the revelation of the mystery, kept secret since the world began." What was that mystery that was kept secret before the world began? It was the plan of salvation, right? And so it continues saying, verse 26, "But now manifest." In other words, it was kept secret in eternity past, but now it has been manifest, or it has been revealed. Because that plan, we know that plan now. And it says, "And by the prophetic scriptures, made known to all nations, according to the commandment of the everlasting God, for obedience to the faith, to God alone wise, be glory through Jesus Christ forever. Amen." So the mystery of God is the preaching of the gospel. So if it speaks about finishing the mystery of God, it must mean the end of the preaching of the gospel. When would that be? It would have to be when probation closes. Because after probation closes, preaching the gospel will do nothing, because all cases are decided after the investigative judgment comes to an end. Let me read you a statement from Ellen White where she constantly uses the word mystery, and she speaks about the gospel and the preaching of the gospel, just like what we read in Romans chapter 16. She wrote, "The incarnation of Christ is a mystery. The union of divinity with humanity is a mystery, indeed, hidden with God, even the mystery which hath been hid from ages. It was kept in eternal silence by Jehovah, and was first revealed in Eden by the prophecy that the seed of the woman should bruise the serpent's head, and that he should bruise his heel." That's the first gospel promise, right? So the mystery that was kept secret, in Eden, it's revealed. The plan of salvation. There's going to be a battle, and Christ is going to overcome, the seed of the woman is going to overcome Satan. He's going to crush his head. So that's the unveiling of the gospel, if you please. Then it continues saying, "To present to the world this mystery." So there's the preaching part, right? "To present to the world this mystery that God kept in silence for eternal ages, before the world was created, before man was created, was the part that Christ was to act in the work he entered upon when he came to this earth. And this wonderful mystery, the incarnation of Christ and the atonement that he made, must be declared." See, there's a preaching part. "Must be declared to every son and daughter of Adam, whether Jew or Gentile." So that's Signs of the Times, March 25, 1897. Signs of the Times, March 25, 1897. So, to make this very, very clear, you have the mystery of God ending right before the seventh trumpet blows, and then the seventh trumpet blows. That's when Jesus takes over the kingdom. At that point, he'll remove his priestly robes. He's going to change. He's going to change into his royal robes. You say, how do we know that? It's biblical. Ellen White says that in several places, but it's biblical. Let me ask you, what is Jesus doing today in the sanctuary? He's interceding, right? In the holy place. Well, in the most holy place, but he's continuing the intercession in the most holy place. So how is he dressed? In priestly robes. You can read it in Hebrews chapter 8, verses 1 through 5. When Jesus returns, how is he garbed? Revelation 19, as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So he must have changed from his priestly robes to his kingly robes. Now, this moment when probation closes, right before the seventh trumpet blows, is referred to in Daniel chapter 12, verse 1. And I'm going to review this again because it's important. It says, Michael shall stand up. Ellen White begins the chapter on the time of trouble in the first paragraph by quoting Daniel 12, verse 1, and she describes the close of probation. Now, what does it mean to stand up? Well, it means that probation is closed. It means to begin to rule. Why is Jesus going to begin to rule when probation closes? Because his kingdom is complete. What is his kingdom? The people. When did he determine whose people are? In the investigative judgment. See, this Adventist view makes all the sense in the world. It's biblical. And Ellen White echoes what we find in the Bible. These are the types of things that prove that Ellen White was correct. Those that attack Ellen White, they're very superficial. They don't look at all these details that jive together. You say, how do we know that standing up refers to beginning to rule? Because the same word, stand up, is used earlier in the chapter in Daniel 11, verses 2 and 3, where it says, 3 kings shall yet stand up in Persia. What does that mean, 3 kings will yet stand up in Persia? It means 3 kings will yet rule in Persia. So we know that stand up means Jesus begins to rule because his kingdom is complete, probation is closed. He's no longer an intercessor. Now he garbs himself as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So let's go through the sequence. The angel raises his hand and swears an oath that time will be no longer during the 6th trumpet. In other words, no more time prophecies. Then next, you have the finishing of the mystery of God, the finishing of the preaching of the gospel. That's the close of probation. Then a time of trouble will begin. Because after Michael stands up, what happens? It says there will be a time of trouble, such as there never was. And then the 7th trumpet will sound, which is the moment that Jesus empirically takes over the kingdom. When probation closes, legally he has the kingdom. But when he returns, he empirically and personal takes over the kingdom. And so the 7th trumpet will sound, and Jesus will physically take over the kingdoms of this world. Now, there are 2 other places that I want to bring to view that describe the close of probation. The first is in Revelation 15, verses 5 through 8. After the preaching of the 3 angels' messages in chapter 14, verses 6 through 12. That's the three angels' messages. In the very next chapter, we have the close of probation in Revelation 15, verses 5 through 8. Let's read those verses. After these things I looked, and behold, the temple of the tabernacle. That's interesting. Temple, what is the temple of the tabernacle? The tabernacle is the sanctuary. The temple of the tabernacle is the most holy place. The word naos, which is temple, is used 16 times in Revelation, and every single time it refers to the most holy place. Another verse is Revelation 11:19. It says, then the temple of God was opened in heaven, and the ark of his testament was seen. Where was the ark of the testament? In the most holy place. So the 16 times that the word temple is used, it refers to the most holy place. It's the temple of the tabernacle. It's the temple of the sanctuary. And the temple of the sanctuary is the most holy place. Now, why is the temple opened? In Revelation 11:19, the temple is opened because Jesus moves into the most holy place to start his final work in the most holy place. But in Revelation 15, the temple opens not for Jesus to begin his work, but for Jesus to finish his work. Because out of the temple come the seven angels with the seven last plagues. So has probation closed at this point? Absolutely. It says, and out of the temple, the naos, came the seven angels having the seven plagues. Has probation closed at this point? Do the plagues fall before or after the close of probation? After the close of probation. Because it's the unmitigated wrath of God without mixture. It's pure justice. Probation is closed. So it says, and out of the temple, the naos, came the seven angels having the seven plagues, clothed in pure bright linen, and having their chests girded with golden bands. Then one of the four living creatures gave to the seven angels 7 golden bowls, full of what? Full of the wrath of God, because probation is closed, who lives forever and ever. The temple, naos, most holy place, was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power. And no one was able to enter the naos, the most holy place, till the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were completed. What does that mean, no one could enter the most holy place until after the plagues? It simply means, can we enter the most holy place now? So what do we take, a rocket to go up there? No. You know, it says in Hebrews chapter 4, let us come boldly to the throne of grace. It's not going physically there. It's by faith entering there. So at this point, has Jesus ceased to be the intercessor, and now he is going to pour out the plagues without mixture of mercy? Absolutely. It says no one was able to enter the temple, the naos, the most holy place, till the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were completed. Is this clear? 2 people believe it's clear. The second passage that I want us to notice is Revelation 22, 10 through 12. Revelation 22 and verses 10 through 12. There's 3 consecutive points of time here in these verses. It says in verse 10, and he said to me, speaking to John, do not seal the words of the prophecy of this book. Don't seal the book of Revelation, for the time is at hand. Now let me ask you, if the book of Revelation is not sealed, the prophecy of this book, can people still read it and prepare for salvation? Yes. Of course, because it's not sealed. But it says, the time is at hand. The question is, what time is at hand? The very next verse. He who is unjust, let him be unjust still. He who is filthy, let him be filthy still. He who is righteous, let him be righteous still. And he who is holy, let him be righteous, holy still. Let me ask you, does that sound pretty final?
Yeah.
What's being described there? The close of probation. And then you have the third point here, and it says, Jesus is speaking, and behold, I am coming quickly, and my reward is with me to give to everyone according to his work. That's the second coming. So you have 3 points. The book of Revelation is still open. People can read it, and they can prepare for what's coming. But the time is at hand when he who is unjust will be unjust still. He who is filthy, let him be filthy still. He who is righteous, let him be righteous still. He who is holy, let him be holy still. And then, after probation closes, Jesus says, I come quickly and my reward is with me. He's going to reward God's people now. Now, Daniel 7 presents the same scenario. Remember we studied Daniel chapter 7? Let's read once again Daniel 7. This is a long passage, but some people were not here when I read it the first time. It says in Daniel 7, 9 and 10, I watched till thrones were put in place. Why thrones? Not throne, thrones. Because the 24 elders sit on thrones. They are the representatives of the world that never sinned, of the worlds that never sinned, and they are going to be the heavenly jury. I watched till thrones were put in place, and the Ancient of Days was seated. Where is this taking place? In heaven. His garment was white as snow, and his hair on his head was pure, like pure wool. His throne, now it's one throne where the Father sits. His throne was a fiery flame, its wheels a burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came from before him. 1,000 thousands ministered to him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were opened. What stage of the judgment is this? The investigative stage, right? The Father's on the throne, the jury surrounds, and now the books are going to be opened to see who was a true believer. And some people say, well, why does God need investigative judgment? He knows everything. Yeah, he does, but we don't. And the heavenly beings don't. The purpose of the judgment is not to inform God. It's to inform people who don't have the knowledge that God has. After all, what would you think if an individual is taken before a court and the judge is doing the judging? Before the judgment starts, the judge says, there's no need to examine this case. This guy's guilty. How do you think people would react? How do we know that he's guilty? Are you following me or not? That's the purpose of the judgment. It's not for God. And by the way, the Gospels are full of the investigative judgment. The parables of Christ. I mean, it's unbelievable. By the way, can forgiveness be given and then revoked? Or is a person forgiven forever? No. You remember the story of the 2 debtors? The guy that owed 10,000 talents. He could never pay. And so the king said, throw him into prison with his family until he pays. But then he cried out, he says, oh, please, please, no, give me time. And I will eventually pay you. And the king says, are you kidding? You could never pay 10,000 talents. in 20 lifetimes. But then this individual is crying out, and the story says that the king forgave his debt. He was forgiven. But then he goes out the door, and he finds this poor soul that owes him 100 denarii, the equivalent of 100 days of work. See, he could pay in installments, right? And this individual who was forgiven a huge debt now says, pay me what you owe. And this individual does the same thing that he did. Oh, please give me time and I'll pay you back. And instead of saying, I forgive you, he took the guy by the neck and he was choking him. Pay me. Well, the servants of the king saw this. By the way, the servants of the king are the angels. And they come to the king, they say, you know what that guy did that you forgave a big debt? He was choking a guy who owed him just a pittance. And the king says, oh yeah? And he calls this guy before him. And he revokes his forgiveness. Because he was a counterfeit believer. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Those are the kinds of things that are investigated in the judgment to see if an individual is a true believer. And the life shows it. Let's continue here. The books are open. This is for the investigative judgment. Now let's go to verse 13. I was watching in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man, that's Jesus, coming with the clouds of heaven. He came to whom? Is he coming to this earth? No. The Millerites misunderstood. They thought that Jesus was going to come to the earth. But it clearly says he came to the Ancient of Days. Where does the Ancient of Days live? Our Father which art everywhere. No. Our Father which art in heaven. So it says, he came to the Ancient of Days, and they, that's the angels, brought him near before the Father. Then to him was given, who's giving it to him? Who's the only one that could give something to Jesus? The Father. Then to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom. What stage of the judgment is that? The sentencing stage. Are you with me or not? That all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom, the one which shall not be destroyed. Now let's go to verse 16. Is this 16? Maybe it's 18. I scribbled on it. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom. Jesus receives the kingdom, and then the saints receive the kingdom. What stage of the judgment is that? When Jesus comes to take his people home. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever. Even forever and ever. Verse 22. I was watching, and the same horn was making war against the saints and prevailing against men. This is the little horn. Until the Ancient of Days came. Came to where? Is he coming to the earth? No. It says earlier, it says that he comes to the most holy place. So he must have been in another place before. Can we believe that Jesus went from the holy to the most holy from the Bible? Yes, we can. Because it says until the Ancient of Days came. Earlier, it says he came to the most holy place where the judgment takes place. So it says, I was watching, and the same horn was making war against the saints and prevailing against them until the Ancient of Days came, and a judgment was made in favor of the saints of the Most High. See what the purpose of the judgment is? It's actually to give a judgment or a verdict in favor of the saints of the Most High. But in order to do that, there has to be what? There has to be investigation of the records. And then notice what it says. Here's the third stage. Until the Ancient of Days came, that's the investigative stage. And a judgment was made in favor of the saints, that's the sentence. And then it says, and the time came for the saints to possess the kingdom. That's the implementation of the verdict. It's all there. Do you know why people can't accept the investigative judgment? Why even some Adventists these days are trying to get rid of the investigative judgment? It's a very simple reason. They don't want to be investigated. They have things in their lives that they know are a real problem. So it's much easier to get rid of the judgment than to get rid of what they need to get rid of. Continue saying, in verse 25. Remember that there's several repetitions here, right? Verse 25 says, he, the little horn once again, shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times and law. Then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time, but the court shall be seated. Did the papacy kill millions? Were they faithful people, the ones that were killed? That was a great injustice. The good people die and the bad people survive. Does God have to rectify that? Where is he going to rectify it? In the investigative judgment. So it says, then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time, but the court shall be seated, and they, that's the heavenly jury, shall take away his dominion to consume and destroy it forever. Now let's go to verse 27. Then the kingdom and dominion and greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people, the saints of the Most High. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. So you have all three stages. Investigation, verdict or sentence, and then the execution of the sentence. Now the next element in Revelation 10 is the bittersweet experience. This is fascinating, the bittersweet experience. It's clear that the little book experience, which is in verses 8 through 11, precedes the closing of probation, because it's describing what happened in 1844. So now, John is going to go back in time in verses 8 through 11. And I want you to notice, and you say, well, how do we know that? Well, for the simple reason that verses 8 through 11, which come after the ending of the mystery of God, in verse 11 it says, you must prophesy again. So what use would it be to prophesy again if the little book episode takes place after the close of probation? So, if the mystery of God had already finished and probation had closed, there would be no reason to prophesy again about the contents of the book. Now, the assimilation of the little book by John causes a bittersweet reaction. In the mouth, the judgment message, we're talking about the judgment message, right? Because the book, what is the book? The little book that was sealed. The little book that was sealed is Daniel 8 through 12, which deals particularly with what? With the 2300 days and the investigative judgment. So the assimilation of the little book, the eating of the little book, by John causes a bittersweet reaction. In the mouth, the judgment book was sweet. Because this is the little book that deals with the 2300 days, and it deals with the investigative judgment. So this is what is being consumed by John. Now, we've already identified the contents of the book as the prophecy of 2,300 days, especially the time element. This means that the judgment hour message was sweet to John, but in the aftermath it became bitter. Are you following this? The little book contains the judgment hour message. So at first, when John eats the message of the judgment, oh, it's a sweet experience. But then afterwards, in the aftermath, it becomes bitter. Have you ever had the experience of having something sweet in your mouth and then causing you indigestion? I have. But it's usually pizza. Now, why is this book sweet? And what does it mean to eat it? Let's notice several verses that help us understand that. Jeremiah 15, verse 16. It says, "Your words were found, and I ate them. And your word was to me the joy and rejoicing of my heart. I am called by your name, O Lord God of hosts." So, it's speaking about Jeremiah eating God's words, and it causes joy and rejoicing. Notice Psalm 119, verse 103. Psalm 119, 103. The psalmist says, "How sweet are your words to my taste, sweeter than honey to my mouth." So what is it that's sweet? John is eating the book, and it's causing rejoicing, joy, happiness. Notice Exodus 16:31. Remember what the manna tasted like? The manna tasted like honey. It says in Exodus 16:31, "And the house of Israel called its name manna," which means what is it? Because they'd never seen it before. They went out and they found all this manna on the ground. They say, "Manna, manna." And it was like white coriander seed, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. So God has a sweet tooth. Of course, good sweets, not sugar. Now, what does it mean that it was sweet in the mouth? Let me ask you, was the message of 1844 leading up to October 22, was it a sweet experience? Yes. Did it have anything to do with the little book? With the judgment? With the 2,300 days? The joy that they had? Of course. Ellen White wrote in the Seventh-day Adventist Bible Commentary, Volume 7, 971, "The comprehension of truth, the glad reception of the message, is represented in the eating of the little book. Truth in regard to the time of the advent of our Lord was a precious message to our souls." Oh, they rejoiced. Jesus is coming. He's coming to pick us up. Sweet. In fact, Ellen White said that the year that led up to October 22, 1844 was the happiest year of my life. They loved Jesus. And those who criticize the investigative judgment in 1844, they ought to be ashamed of themselves because they did not participate in that. Right? But the people that went through it, in a moment I'm going to read you some statements after the great disappointment. Now, something else has to do with the eating of the book. This whole scene actually comes from Ezekiel 3, 1-4. Ezekiel, it not only means to assimilate the message, it means to proclaim the message. To assimilate it, understand it, and then proclaim it. Is that what happens to the Millerites? Did they assimilate the message? Yeah, they misunderstood it. But did they go out and proclaim it? far and wide. Yeah, the midnight cry. Notice what Ellen White wrote. Actually, Ezekiel 3, 1-4. Moreover, he said to me, Son of man, eat what you find. Eat this scroll and go. Speak to the house of Israel. So notice, eat the scroll and what? Speak to Israel. So I opened my mouth, and he caused me to eat that scroll. And he said to me, Son of man, feed your belly and fill your stomach with this scroll that I gave you. So I ate, and it was in my mouth like honey and sweetness. Then he said to me, Son of man, go to the house of Israel and speak with my words to them. So assimilating the message is to understand the message, to rejoice at the message, but that involves also proclaiming the message, according to the book of Ezekiel. Now let's talk about the great disappointment. How do you think these people felt? We can only imagine how they felt after the disappointment. Their expectation of the second coming was sweet as honey, but the aftermath was bitter. Let me read you what Hiram Edson wrote. By the way, he's the one that had that momentary intuition on October 23 and said, I saw Jesus going from the holy to the most holy. And then they studied many of the passages that they had understood as the second coming. They said, no, there's investigation and there's a sentence before that. Notice what he wrote. We confidently expected to see Jesus Christ and all the holy angels with him, and that his voice would call up Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and all the ancient worthies, and dear friends which had been torn from us by death, and that our trials and sufferings with our earthly pilgrimage would close, and we should be caught up to meet our coming Lord, to be forever with him, to inhabit bright golden mansions in the golden home city prepared for the redeemed. Our expectations were raised high, and thus we looked for our coming Lord until the clock tolled 12 at midnight. See, they still did not understand that the day starts at sunset. They still have things to learn before they would be ready. The statement continues. The day had then passed, and our disappointment became a certainty. Our fondest hopes and expectations were blasted, and such a spirit of weeping came over us as I never experienced before. It seemed that the loss of all earthly friends could have been no comparison. We wept and wept till the day dawned. I mused in my own heart, saying, my Advent experience has been the richest and brightest of all my Christian experience. If this had proved a failure, what was the rest of my Christian experience worth? Has the Bible proved a failure? Is there no God, no heaven, no golden home city, no paradise? Is all this but a cunningly devised fable? Is there no reality to our fondest hope and expectation of these things? And thus we had something to grieve and weep over. Bitter, right? If all our fond hopes were lost, and as I said, we wept till the day dawned, we can only intellectually sympathize with them. You know, we can imagine, but we really don't understand what happened. Another individual, one of the pioneers that was in expectation, was Washington Morse. This, by the way, that statement I just read is in the vault, Ellen White vault at Andrews University. Washington Morse, this is from the Review and Herald, May 7, 1901. The passing of the time was a bitter disappointment. Interesting the terminology that he uses, bitter disappointment. True believers had given up all for Christ and had shared his presence as never before. The love of Jesus filled every soul. And with inexpressible desire they prayed, come, Lord Jesus, and come quickly, but he did not come. and now to turn again to the cares, perplexities, and dangers of life in full view of jeering and reviling unbelievers who scoffed as never before was a terrible trial of faith and patience. When Elder Himes, one of the pioneers, when Elder Himes visited Waterbury, Vermont, a short time after the passing of the time, and stated that the brethren should prepare for another cold winter, my feelings were almost uncontrollable. I left the place of meeting and wept like a child. One more, William Miller. This is found in words that he wrote to a letter to I.O. Orr, December 13, 1844. It passed. And the next day it seemed as though all the demons from the bottomless pit were let loose on us. The same ones and many more who were crying for mercy 2 days before were not now mixed with the rabble and mocking, scoffing, and threatening in a most blasphemous manner. Imagine what it's like. Sweet in the mouth, the Word of God, of the little book, judgment, 2,300 days. Jesus is coming. And then afterwards, Jesus did not come. Bitter disappointment. Now, it's interesting, the experience of the Millerites was very similar to the experience of the disciples. Let me describe what happened with the disciples. The followers of Jesus had never had a sweeter experience than when Jesus entered Jerusalem on a donkey and the multitudes proclaimed him king. Oh, they were singing. They were singing the psalms. The children were singing, "Hail the King who is coming." Was Jesus fulfilling a specific prophecy? Yes, he was. The prophecy of the 70 weeks. In the middle of the week, Messiah would die. And by the way, the 70 weeks is the first part of the 2,300 days. The disciples were sure that Jesus was going to establish his kingdom on earth. But they were mistaken about the event. Correct? They were mistaken about the event. The timing of the event was correct. The middle of the 70th week. But they were wrong about the date, rather the event that was going to take place. The followers of Jesus, after Christ's death, were bitterly disappointed. Correct? Yes. However, after the disappointment, 2 followers of Jesus were on the road to Emmaus. And Jesus caught up to them. And he explained the word to them, what had really happened. He explained the event that was going to say, the date is right, but the event is not taking over the kingdom. And Jesus on the road clarified the prophecies, and their hearts were filled with joy. Then Jesus, 40 days later, entered the holy place. Just like in 1844, he entered the most holy place. The majority of those who professed to follow Jesus did not follow him into the holy place. And his work there could not benefit them. These are words by Ellen White. And they were left in total darkness. Jesus then gave the disciples the command to preach again with the new understanding of what Jesus was doing. A small remnant of believers, 120 that were left, who remained faithful in spite of the disappointment, became the nucleus of the Christian church. Thus the Christian church began with a great disappointment. So if somebody comes to you and say, oh, you're the great disappointment people, tell them the story of the disciples. They gained a new understanding, right? And then they went out and preached with the new understanding they had. Did the Millerites do the same? The faithful ones that remained? Absolutely. So the Christian church began with a great disappointment. And the Adventist church began with a great disappointment. Now let me do the parallel of the triumphal entry with what happened with the Millerites. The Millerites also had a sweet experience when they were expecting Jesus to come to earth on October 22, 1844. Was Jesus fulfilling a specific time prophecy? Yeah. The 2300 days, which is the larger portion of the prophecy that included the 70 weeks. The Millerites were sure that Jesus was going to establish his what? His kingdom on earth. Were they right about the time?
Yes.
Were they wrong about the event?
Yes.
And you think this is coincidence? Jesus failed to meet their expectations. So the sweet experience turned into bitterness. The two disciples on the road to Emmaus said, we thought that he was going to be the one who would redeem Israel. Mary Magdalene cried. She was crying on resurrection morning. And the women on the Via Dolorosa were also weeping because Jesus was going to the cross. He wasn't going to take over the kingdom. The sweet experience became bitter. However, the day after the disappointment, there were two Millerites. How many? Two Millerites that were crossing a field. We know the name of one, but we don't know the name of the other. The same way we know the name of one of the disciples that followed Jesus. His name was Cleophas. We don't know the name of the other. Hiram Edson was one. And as he was crossing the field, he had a momentary intuition. Some say it was a short vision. Some say it was an intuition. Holy Spirit planted it in his mind. And he received kind of like a vision. He saw the heavenly sanctuary and Jesus going from the holy to the most holy. He says, wow, we need to take a look at this. And so they restudied Daniel chapter 8. And they discovered that they had been wrong about the event. And their sorrow was turned into joy.
Amen.
And then you have the eating of the book. Bitter, sweet, then bitter. The majority of those who had embraced the movement apostatized. And there was only a small remnant left. Only 120 before the day of Pentecost. The faithful remnant then restudied the prophecies that they had misinterpreted. And then they were ordered to prophesy again with the new understanding of prophecy. A small remnant of believers remained faithful in spite of the disappointment and became the nucleus of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Interesting parallel, isn't it? Now, let's talk a little more about this little book. There's something strange about the description of eating the book, and it's sweet and it's bitter. You'll notice that it's repeated twice. The first time it says, it will be bitter in your stomach and sweet in your mouth. Now that seems to be kind of a weird order. But then, a little bit further down, it says, it will be sweet in your mouth and bitter in your stomach. How do we explain that? We have a chiastic structure here. ABC, CBA. The angel tells John to take the scroll and eat it. That's verse 9a. He's told it will be bitter in your stomach, 9b, verse 9, letter B. C, in your mouth it will be sweet as honey. So it says, bitter in the stomach, sweet as honey. But then you have the chiasm. It repeats C once again. It tasted as sweet as honey in my mouth. Now it's going to give the correct order. It was bitter in my stomach. That's 10b. And then the angel tells John, you must prophesy again, which is the letter A. What does it mean to eat the scroll? To eat the scroll, it means that you must assimilate the message and proclaim it. So, letter A in the first part of the chiasm, the angel tells John to take the scroll and to eat it. Letter A in the second part of the chiasm, the angel tells John, you must prophesy again. So in other words, it's saying that prophesy again means the same as eating the scroll. Now, it doesn't say you should prophesy again. It says you must prophesy again. According to the Exegetical Dictionary of the New Testament, the word must, and now I quote, designates an unconditional necessity. Sentences with this verb have fundamentally an absolute, unquestioned, and often anonymous and deterministic character. It is an order. You must prophesy again. In other words, we are committed to preaching the 1844 message. Now, if you allow me just to finish, one more point. John is told to eat the book. So it was John that ate the book. That's not saying that the Millerite movement was going to eat the book. One person was told to eat the book. It'll be sweet in the mouth and bitter in the stomach. So here's the question. Does this symbolic portrayal apply to John in the first century, or does the act of John symbolize the experience of an end-time remnant? Let me read you what William Shea wrote. He was my teacher at the seminary, phenomenal teacher, photographic memory. He would come to class with no notes. He was a physician. And in my first class with him, he says, I cannot understand how anybody would prefer being a physician than an archaeologist. He would come to class, he would give measurements, he would give names, he would give places, all from his memory. And he wrote a commentary on Daniel as well. This is what he wrote. John lived at the beginning of the Christian era, right? When he received this vision. However, the prophetic scene itself looks down toward the end of time during the period of the sixth trumpet. Long after John's death, so it can't be referring to John, because at the beginning of the Christian dispensation, this has to happen during the sixth trumpet. So it's not applying to John. He should therefore be taken as representatives of those who will bear this final message, the part he was acting out under those circumstances. And now he gives a second reason. It would have been physically impossible for John to bear this message to all the groups he was told to address. Peoples, nations, tongues. Could John fulfill that purpose? One person? He was in Patmos. We may look, therefore, for a group or movement to fulfill this commission in the end time. I have a quotation here I'm not going to read. So let's go through Revelation 10. I know that time is up, but you said you were going to be lenient. I'm going to hold you to your word. Let's summarize Revelation 10, point by point. The angel descends from heaven to earth. Who is the angel? The messenger, Christ. The angel's physical characteristics are then described. The angel brought in his right hand an open scroll. What scroll is that? The little book. This means that the angel had already opened it before he descended to the earth, because it's open when he descends. The angel placed one foot on dry land and the other on the sea. It means that the message is global. The angel then spoke with the roar of a lion that echoed like seven thunders. The angel then told John to seal the message that the thunders uttered and not to write them down. And we already studied that. The angel then swore an oath in the name of the Creator that time would be no longer, no more prophetic time periods. The angel then gave the book to John, instructing him to eat it, and told him it would be bitter in his stomach and sweet as honey in his mouth. John then ate the book, and it was sweet in his mouth. The aftermath of the eating of the book was indigestion. The same angel then instructed John to prophesy again from the little book. You can't do something again unless you've done it before. The same angel then commanded John to measure the temple and those who worship there. Do you know what measure means? It means to judge. Read Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 and 2. Judge not, that ye be not judged. Because the measure that you use to judge will be used to judge you. So measuring the temple means, after he's commanded to prophesy again, measuring the temple is the investigative judgment. And then the mystery of God ends, the preaching of the gospel, when the trumpet is, the seventh trumpet is about to blow. Now, final point. Why does the Seventh-day Adventist Church exist? Let me read you two statements in closing. In a special sense, Seventh-day Adventists have been set in the world as watchmen. A watchman is a defensive task, to defend. And light bearers, that's an offensive. We're to play defense of the message and proclaim it, offense. To them has been entrusted the last warning for a perishing world. On them is shining wonderful light from the Word of God. They have been given a work of the most solemn importance, the proclamation of the first, second, and third angels' messages. There is no other work of so great importance. They are to allow nothing else to absorb their attention. That distinguishes us. How many of you have ever seen a church that say, our mission is to preach the three angels' message? There's only one church in the whole world that says our reason for existence is to proclaim the three angels' messages. Now let me read you one other statement. Sometimes we're very triumphalistic. Listen carefully to what I'm going to say. This is God's church. But God never chooses a church unconditionally. He doesn't. Because then he's going to have to apologize to Israel. Because God said, it's my people forever. Let me read you this solemn statement. You know, we usually read the one where it says the church will look like it's going to fall, but it's not going to fall. The sinners of Zion will be shaken out. And, you know, this is God's church. It has issues, but it's God's church. But we need to understand that the church has not been chosen unconditionally. Ellen White said as much in this quotation, which seldom is quoted. Last Day Events 59 and 60. In the balances of the sanctuary, the Seventh-day Adventist Church is to be weighed. What are the balances? What is the balance? it's used to, it represents the judgment, right? God said to Belshazzar, you have been weighed in the balances and have found wanting. You've been judged, in other words. In the balances of the sanctuary, the Seventh-day Adventist Church is to be weighed. She will be judged by the privileges and advantage that she has had. If her spiritual experience does not correspond to the advantages that Christ, at infinite cost, has bestowed on her, if the blessings conferred have not qualified her to do the work entrusted to her, on her will be pronounced the sentence, found wanting. By the light bestowed, the opportunity is given, will she be judged? That's a solemn statement. So, folks, we need to get down to business. We need to do what God has called us to do. The church needs to return to rediscovering who we are, why we exist. We're not any old church. We're not one church in the bunch. This is the remnant church. And Satan wants it. That's why he's causing all kinds of divisions in the Adventist church. Because he knows that if he can divide God's army and unite his, he thinks he can win. But we know that he's not. Okay. Tomorrow morning, we are going to talk about the spirit of prophecy. And tomorrow afternoon, surprise.
Amen.